Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves. Because you've already invited me into your home, now I have to drink your blood. Today we are talking about Silvia Moreno Garcia's Certain Dark Things. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I bought this book myself, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. They actually had this in my local bookshop, the fantasy section of which is normally terrible. Very exciting. I am going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the book. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, don't watch this video. And I will link the story graph below if you would like to check out any content warnings. This is described by Silvia Moreno Garcia as a neon noir. It originally came out in 2016, I think, based on my research, but it got reprinted in 2021 after kind of a bit of a Silvia Moreno Garcia revival, and I think everyone was a bit more here for vampires last year. I've talked about Silvia Moreno Garcia a lot on this channel. There's a number of reviews up if you want to do a little cheeky search. I've got a few of them. My personal favourite of hers is Mexican Gothic. I just love it, but I've read I think pretty much everything she's written at this point, including her most recent release. I think it'll be out by the time you're watching this, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. She writes around a lot of different topics. There's some fantasy in there, there's some crime novels in there. Velvet Was the Night is a really good crime one. Basically, if you're interested in reading about books that typically are set in or related to Mexico or Mexican identity, I recommend Silvia Moreno Garcia. I write myself very brief plot summaries for these just to kind of jog my memory, and this one is written, I've written vampires in Mexico City and the bin man has to help, chase scenes galore, which does summarise the book but probably isn't the most helpful. So, we are in a world where, at a certain point in the past, it was revealed that vampires were real the whole time. Some cities went, oh no, let's get the vampires out of here. London is the most extreme. Mexico City, currently, here we are in sort of the future, or perhaps an alternate timeline, we have Mexico City where vampires are not allowed to be. However, Atle, who is a ghost. The ghost is back. If you haven't been here for previous videos, a ghost keeps opening my bathroom door. It's definitely just the wind, but it's more fun to say it's a ghost. Atle, pictured here on the cover, is a vampire of Mexican descent, a kind of vampire specific to Mexico, and she's in Mexico City because she is trying to find something out and to stop something happening. I don't want to spoil everything, but she meets Domingo, who is a person who is working. It's not a bin man, that's not how I would describe it, but he picks up trash and sells it on. And he becomes sort of in Atle's employ, and as I say, chase scenes. It's a lot of cat and mouse. There are other vampires around. There's a police officer who's trying to catch them as well. It's a whole thing. And it's all in this neon noir, kind of slightly futuristic Mexico City. One of the things I really liked about this book is the idea that there are different kinds of vampires. I think we're very used to all vampires having similar origin. Like the most you'll get is in something like Vampire Academy, where you have the nice vampires and then just the angry version of those vampires. More often than not, it's just one type, and it's typically the sort of Eastern European thing, which has its roots in a number of slightly problematic places. European vampires do exist, but we also have very different styles of vampire across the world, some of which we meet in this book, and I really liked that as an idea. I like the idea of vampirism being one thing that had many different varieties. Atle's vampirism is a particular type, which I very much enjoyed, and I don't want to get into too much because I think it's interesting to find out in the book, but we also have kind of European vampires that are kind of colonising vampires, which was really, really interesting, and to bring that idea of colonisation into a vampire story was fascinating to me. And obviously something that Silvia Moreno Garcia has included in a lot of her works, so I wasn't surprised to see it. It was just interesting to see the way that she explored that in this book. So yeah, if you want a book with lots of different styles of vampires, this might be one for you. I've always loved Silvia Moreno Garcia's settings, and for the most part they've been either historical or semi-fantastical, historically sort of settings, so it was really interesting to see how she would write a kind of semi-futuristic, not quite, you know, completely in the future, but just like there are enhancements and things going on, and that like neon element of it. I think it works really well. I've always said that Silvia Moreno Garcia is a person who can write particular spaces really well, so Domingo's home, in inverted commas, is really interesting. Atle's space is fascinating, and you really get a sense of the rooms that you are in. I describe it a lot as like film set design, where you can really see the individual places and why they are the way they are. That's something that I've seen in a lot of her work, and it's something that's definitely reflected here. Much like Circe, which I think I reviewed last week, probably? I can't remember where we are in the schedule. I actually really enjoyed this on a reread. The first time I read it, I don't think I was quite in the right headspace for it, which is worth knowing if you're planning on reading this. Maybe get yourself in that right headspace. It's a little bit slower paced than you would think it is, but it works really well on a reread, and actually, having now done a reread, it is a book that I would read again and again, I think. Not back to back every year, but I'll pick it up in the future, I think. So if you're a person who likes a book that does improve on a reread, if you're the kind of person who likes to invest in books that you're going to want to pick up again and again, this would be an option for you. And I do think that you get more emotion out of it every time. Knowing where things are going, I find very helpful in this kind of story, and knowing what kind of resolution you're going to get. That really helps me to engage with the book in the early stages because I know what I need to be looking out for. I do think, having read it twice, that it tails off just a little bit towards the end. I think it just feels a tiny bit rushed. And that's not saying that suddenly the action ramps up or anything. It's just one of those things where the way that things resolve didn't quite hammer home for me both times that I read it. So perhaps that's something to bear in mind. I don't know if, again, on a third read that would change, because I'd have even better understanding of where things are going. But yeah, it sort of felt like I wanted another 100 pages or so just to deal with some of the fallout of things that happen. But that wasn't what the book gave me, and potentially that might be really enjoyable to you. I do think you have to kind of engage the part of your brain that thrives on short stories and on novellas and that kind of thing, where you do fill in the gaps a bit for yourself and can insert a bit more of an ending for you, which is interesting because I believe that this book was originally inspired by a short story, so it makes a lot of sense. This last thing I'm going to mention is entirely personal. It has nothing to do with the book itself, it's just something about me, and I was debating leaving it out of this review because I tend to try and be a little bit like, this is my feeling, this is the things that I think have broader application, but I do think it's interesting to talk about, and maybe it's something to talk about in detail in another video. But I think, for me personally, I'm very used to reading and liking characters who are very intelligent, and in lots of different ways intelligent. Like, you have your street smart characters, you have your book smart characters. A lot of the characters that I gravitate towards are the ones who are the smartest person in the room, and this book, Domingo, is not one of those people. And I think you can make an argument for street smarts on Domingo's part, but I don't necessarily agree all the time. Mostly because I think if I had someone be like, hey, can I drink your blood? I would say no. I would say this feels like it's going to get me in trouble. And I can see that that's an intentional thing that Silvia Moreno Garcia has done, right? I don't think it's like, why on earth didn't you make your character the smartest man ever? That's not the kind of storytelling I want. But it was really interesting to me as a reader to go, okay, I'm not used to rooting for this character, or I'm not used to reading this kind of character. How do I get in the right headspace for that? And I think it's why it didn't work for me the first time around, because I wasn't prepared for that. Whereas reading it again, I was like, actually, no, I'm going to appreciate the ways in which Domingo is intelligent, and the moments where he isn't, I'm going to understand why, and why you would make this choice based on the circumstances that you're in. And I think for me personally, I had to be in a much more forgiving mindset because I'm so used to reading characters who always make the smartest choice. Or if they make the wrong choice, it's usually for a very good reason, and they then feel really bad about it afterwards. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, and it's made me realise that I probably ought to try and seek out some more books that have characters of this kind of type, because I would like to get more used to it, because I think otherwise you just read a book and you're like, well, that character was stupid, so, and that's not nice. Not nice, not kind, not good. So yeah, if you have any recommendations for non-book smart characters, and indeed non-street smart characters, plonk them down. I want you just go with the flow chaos characters, please. If you're looking for another vampire book of a very different style, Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, Orbit are releasing a version of it. I think it might already be out. I can't quite remember the timings of it because I have the self-published version. It's a really, really interesting vampire book. Look up the content warnings before you read it, but it's so good. It's so beautifully written. Very different style of vampire book. I have a review up for that if you're interested. I will probably forget to link it, so look it up for yourself. And then the other thing, if you wanted to read another Silvia Moreno Garcia book that was like this, my thing that I think is the most similar is actually Gods of Jade and Shadow, which is another one of her books that was less for me. I didn't love it as much, but it is very good, and it has similar we need to go on an adventure to do a thing vibes like this one does, whereas her other books tend to lean more into like, this is a bit creepy and horror-y, or this is just a crime book. I think those two are probably the most similar, and if you wanted the really cool setting elements of this, like crafting a world, crafting characters within a world, Velvet Was the Night was a really good read. It just doesn't have the fantastical element that you might be interested in if you're watching this channel. So do I think you should read this? I would say if you haven't read any Silvia Moreno Garcia before, unless this is absolutely your jam and this is your favourite thing ever, I would start with something like Mexican Gothic. Personally, I think it's a better book. But I do think that this is a book that got better on a reread, which means it probably would be even better on a third read, and I think it is worth reading as part of Silvia Moreno Garcia's canon of work. I think it's really interesting to see how she writes this slightly different setting. Yeah, I'm always going to love her writing. I'm always going to encourage you to read her books. This isn't the first one I would start with, but it is very, very good. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments, as well as recommending, as always, vampire books, books set in Mexico, neon and noir books if any others exist. Plonk all that down in the comments. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media, come hang out on Discord, we'll have chill chats about books. Nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you would like to join their number and get early access to videos and exclusive content, you can check that out in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.
There's gonna be some bloopers now.
So Atle, who is pictured here on... Don't you do it. Quite figure out the white...